We're married now, Mom. Send me the key to the house in Malibu. My son's words sliced through me like a blade of pure ice. No, hello, how are you? No explanation. Certainly no apology for excluding me from what should have been one of the most significant moments of his life. Just a demand, delivered with the entitled expectation of someone who has never been denied anything. I stood in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring out at the vast Pacific Ocean that has witnessed every triumph and tragedy of my life for the past 40 years. The same ocean that carried my father's ashes, my husband's ashes, and will someday carry mine. Connor, I managed, my voice steadier than my heart. You got married? Yeah, last weekend. Look, Scarlett has always dreamed of honeymooning at the Malibu house. We need the keys ASAP. We're thinking of heading there tomorrow for a month, maybe longer. Scarlett, a name I'd never heard until this moment. My new daughter-in-law, apparently, though I couldn't picture her face, didn't know her voice, hadn't been given the chance to welcome her to our family. And now they wanted my home. Not just any home, but the iconic beachfront property my father, Felix Hartman, had purchased with the proceeds from his legendary screenplays. The home where Hollywood royalty had once gathered around our dinner table, where my children had built sandcastles, where I had held my husband's hand as he took his final breath 5 years ago. I didn't know you were seeing someone seriously, I said, choosing my words carefully. I would have loved to attend your wedding. It was just a small thing, spontaneous. You wouldn't have enjoyed it anyway. His dismissal was casual, practiced. So the keys. Can you have them messengered over today? A memory surfaced. Connor at 7 years old, standing in this very kitchen, demanding the last piece of chocolate cake that I'd been saving for his sister. When I'd suggested he share it, he'd thrown a tantrum that ended with the cake on the floor and no dessert for anyone. Some patterns establish themselves early. Connor, I haven't even met Scarlett. Perhaps you could both come for dinner first? We could celebrate properly and... Mom, there's no time for that. Scarlett has auditions scheduled next month. This is our window for the honeymoon. His impatience crackled through the phone. It's just a house. You can stay at your condo in the city. Just a house. As if the walls that had absorbed decades of laughter, tears, and whispered confidences were merely an asset to be utilized at his convenience. Your sister is bringing the girls for their usual summer visit next week, I reminded him, referring to Arya's teenage daughters who spent every July with me, a tradition as reliable as the tides. They can skip a year or stay at a hotel. Arya can afford it with that university salary. I closed my eyes, feeling a familiar weight settling over me, the weight of being the family peacekeeper, the one who accommodates, who yields, who smooths the waters disturbed by my son's perpetual wake. It was a role I had played since Richard died, perhaps even before. But something was different today. Perhaps it was the sheer audacity of his demand. Perhaps it was the complete disregard for family bonds. Or perhaps, at 69, I had simply reached my limit. Who is she, Connor? I asked quietly. What? Scarlett, your wife, the woman you've apparently known long enough to marry, but not long enough to introduce to your family. She's an actress, incredibly talented. You'll meet her eventually. Look, about the keys. How long have you known her? An irritated sigh. Does it matter? We're in love. It's the real deal. Now can we get back to... It matters to me, I said, my voice finding a firmness I hadn't needed to use with him since he was a teenager. I'm trying to understand why my son would get married without his family present, then immediately demand access to a family home that holds significant meaning to all of us. Jesus, Mom, it's not that complicated. We wanted privacy for our wedding and a nice place for our honeymoon. Why are you making this so difficult? The problem with raising children in privilege is that entitlement can take root when you're not looking, like an invasive species that's harmless until suddenly it's choking everything of value. I need to think about this, Connor, I said finally. This is all very sudden. What's there to think about? It's the family beach house. I'm family. I need it for a month. Simple. Not simple. Nothing about this was simple. Not the marriage I knew nothing about. Not the timing of this request, not the gnawing suspicion forming in my gut that there was more to this story than impulsive romance. Let me consider it, I said. I'll be in touch soon. Mom, we need an answer now. Scarlett's already started packing. She's so excited about... I said I'll be in touch. My tone left no room for argument, a remnant of the authority I'd once wielded effortlessly when my children were young. "Congratulations on your marriage, Connor. I look forward to meeting Scarlett soon." I hung up before he could push further, setting my phone down on the counter with deliberate care. For several minutes, I simply stood there, looking out at the ocean that had borne witness to every chapter of my life. The tide was coming in, waves crashing against the shore with increasing intensity. They wanted my house, not just any house, but the soul of our family, the repository of our most precious memories. And they wanted it without so much as a proper introduction. I picked up my phone again, scrolling to a contact I hadn't used in years, Theodore Blackwell, private investigator, the same man who had discreetly handled several delicate matters for my late husband. "Theo," I said when he answered. "It's Rosalind Bradford. I need your services." Very discreetly, very quickly. After explaining what I needed, I made a second call, this one to my attorney, Margaret Chen. "Margaret, I need to make some immediate changes to my estate plans. How quickly can we execute this?" As I outlined what I wanted, a plan began forming in my mind. Connor and his mysterious bride wanted access to the Malibu house. They would receive something far more valuable than keys, the truth. I smiled as I ended the call, a smile not of happiness, but of resolve. I would not be rushing to messenger over the keys as my son so confidently expected. Instead, I would prepare a different kind of wedding gift, one that would reveal exactly what kind of woman had married into our family, and exactly what kind of mother I really was. Sometimes, at 69, you discover that you're not quite finished surprising people, even yourself. 3 days later, I personally delivered an elegantly wrapped box to Connor's downtown loft, leaving it with his doorman with instructions that it was a wedding gift requiring immediate attention. Inside was not the key to the Malibu house, but something that would make his new bride scream like nothing else could. I simply smiled, hung up the phone, and waited for the inevitable explosion. When you've lived in Hollywood circles as long as I have, you develop a certain instinct about people. My father used to call it the screenplay sense, the ability to see the hidden motivations driving a character's actions, to anticipate the plot twist before it's revealed. It served him well through 40 years of screenwriting, and it served me equally well through 69 years of life. Something about Connor's sudden marriage set off every alarm bell I possessed. Theodore Blackwell understood urgency. Within hours of my call, he had a preliminary report on Scarlett Moore, née Sarah Miller, born in Bakersfield to unremarkable parents who still lived in the same modest ranch house where she'd grown up. "She's reinvented herself thoroughly," Theo explained during our meeting in a discreet cafe far from Malibu. "Changed her name legally at 22, erased her accent, constructed an entirely new background, standard procedure for many in the industry, but she's been particularly thorough." I sipped my Earl Grey, absorbing this information. And her acting career? Minimal credits. A few commercials, background work, one speaking role in an independent film that never saw distribution. He slid a folder across the table. But her relationship history is where things get interesting. The folder contained photographs, dates, names, a meticulous chronicle of Scarlett's romantic entanglements over the past 5 years. Director Julian Hargrove, 30 years her senior, whose period drama had featured Scarlett in a small but pivotal role until their engagement abruptly ended after filming Wrapped. Producer Raymond Chen, whose streaming series mysteriously cast her over more established actresses until their relationship cooled when the show wasn't renewed. Each relationship followed the same pattern. An older, established man in a position of power, a brief period of professional advancement for Scarlett, then a carefully orchestrated exit once she'd secured what she needed. "And Connor?" I asked, studying a recent photograph of my son and Scarlett at some industry event, his arm possessively around her waist, her smile calculated for maximum impact. "They met approximately 4 months ago at a charity event for the Film Preservation Society." Theo hesitated. "A charity event hosted at your Malibu house last March, which you didn't attend due to your sister's health issues." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. She was in my home before meeting Connor? According to my sources, she attended specifically to network with industry executives. Several witnesses recall her asking detailed questions about the property itself, who owned it, its history, its value. "So the house was the target from the beginning," I murmured, pieces falling into place. "Not Connor. Mr. Bradford was likely identified as the access point after the event. His reputation for Theo searched for a diplomatic phrase. Being susceptible to beautiful, ambitious women is fairly well known in certain circles. A polite way of saying my son had a pattern of being manipulated by women who recognized his insecurities and exploited them. His father and I had tried addressing this tendency during his early 20s, only to be dismissed as interfering and out of touch. There's more, Theo continued, turning to the final pages of the report. Ms. Moore has been meeting with real estate developers specializing in converting residential properties to commercial use, specifically luxury boutique hotels. My stomach tightened as I examined the surveillance photos showing Scarlett engaged in animated conversation with men in expensive suits, blueprints spread between them on restaurant tables. The most recent meeting was 3 weeks ago, Theo noted, shortly before the wedding. The gentleman on the left is Howard Kingsley of Oceanfront Developments. They specialize in acquiring beachfront properties for conversion to high-end resorts. The final piece clicked into place. It wasn't just the house Scarlett wanted. It was what the house could become. A landmark property with Hollywood history, perched on one of Malibu's most coveted stretches of coastline, would be worth tens of millions as a boutique hotel. Have you tracked her communications with these developers? I asked. Theo shook his head. That would require access to her personal devices, legally questionable territory. However, he slid another folder toward me. We did manage to record several conversations between Ms. Moore and her friend Vanessa Diaz in public locations. The transcripts are enlightening. I flipped through pages of dialogue that confirmed my worst suspicions. Connor's such a perfect target, desperate for validation, completely blind to manipulation, and the direct line to that incredible property. His mother's almost 70. How much longer can she hold on to a place like that? Once you're married, it's just a matter of time before you can convince him to sell. The developers are offering a 7-figure consulting fee just for delivering the property. Imagine what we could do with that kind of money. The most damning exchange had occurred just days before the wedding. Vanessa, what if his mother refuses to let you use the house? Scarlett, she won't. Connor says she never denies him anything. Besides, we just need to get our foot in the door. Once we're there, I can start planting the idea of selling. The old lady won't live forever, and when she's gone, Connor gets his share. The old lady, me, reduced to an inconvenient obstacle in their path to wealth. What about Connor? I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. Is there any indication he's aware of her motives? None that we've found, Theo replied, his expression softening with rare sympathy. All evidence suggests Mr. Bradford believes this is a genuine romantic relationship. My poor, foolish son, always searching for love in the wrong places, always vulnerable to those who recognized his desperate need for admiration, for all his outward success, the Grammy nominations, the celebrity clients, the lavish lifestyle. Connor had never overcome the deep-seated insecurity that drove him to seek validation from people who would never truly value him. Thank you, Theo, I said, gathering the folders. This is exactly what I needed. What will you do now? He asked. I smiled, a calm settling over me as my plan crystallized. First, I'll speak with my attorney to ensure certain documents are in order. Then, I'll prepare a wedding gift that Ms. Moore will never forget. As I drove back to Malibu along the Pacific Coast Highway, watching waves crash against the shore, I felt a curious sense of peace. I had raised my children to believe in love, in family, in the values that my father had instilled in me. Connor had strayed from those values, seduced by the hollow glamour of the industry that had made our family fortune. But I was still Rosalind Bradford, daughter of Felix Hartman. I had watched legends of the silver screen debate art and life on my terrace. I had built and lost and rebuilt a life of substance. I would not be outmaneuvered by an ambitious actress from Bakersfield with dreams of turning my family sanctuary into a boutique hotel. My father's voice seemed to whisper in my ear as I pulled into the driveway of the home he'd loved so dearly. Every great screenplay needs a third-act twist, Rosie. Make it count. I intended to do exactly that. Margaret Chen's law office always reminded me of a film set. Everything precisely arranged for maximum impact, from the panoramic views of downtown Los Angeles to the strategic placement of her impressive credentials on the walls. Today, the conference room felt like the perfect setting for the scene we were about to craft. "You're certain about this?" Margaret asked, sliding the finalized documents across the polished table. At 53, she'd been handling my legal affairs for over 20 years, ever since she'd impressed Richard with her razor-sharp mind and unflinching honesty. "Absolutely certain," I replied, signing where indicated. "The house has always been meant for my grandchildren. This just makes it official. And Connor? He won't take this well?" I paused, pen hovering above the final signature line. "Connor needs to learn that actions have consequences. Besides, this isn't about punishing him, it's about protecting what matters. The irrevocable nature of this trust means you won't be able to change your mind later," she cautioned. "I'm not going to change my mind." I signed with a flourish, feeling the weight of finality in the motion. Some decisions only need to be made once. After leaving Margaret's office, I drove to my city apartment, a sleek, modern space in a high-rise that Connor had always preferred to the Malibu house. "It's more my vibe," he'd explained once, as if history and beauty were merely aesthetic choices rather than foundations of identity. I'd arranged to meet Aria there, away from curious ears in Malibu. My daughter arrived precisely on time, as she always did, a trait she'd inherited from her father. At 44, with her academic career firmly established and her daughters growing into remarkable young women, Aria had become my confidant in ways Connor had never managed. "Mom," she said, embracing me warmly, "what's this emergency meeting about? Your message sounded ominous." "Your brother got married," I stated without preamble, watching her reaction. Her eyebrows shot up. "Connor? Married? To whom?" Exactly my question. I gestured for her to sit as I poured us both glasses of the Sauvignon Blanc she favored. "An actress named Scarlett Moore, someone he's never mentioned to either of us." Aria accepted the wine, her academic's mind visibly processing this information. "That's unexpected. Connor's always been impulsive, but marriage, without telling anyone? It gets worse." I sat across from her, gathering my thoughts. "He called to inform me of this marriage as a prelude to demanding the keys to the Malibu house for their honeymoon, for at least a month, possibly longer. During our annual visit, the girls have been looking forward to it all year." Indignation flashed across her face. "That's completely unacceptable." "Indeed, which is why I had Ms. Moore investigated." "Mom!" Aria's shock was evident. "You hired a private investigator?" "Something felt wrong," I explained, unapologetic. "My instincts were correct." I summarized Theo's findings: Scarlett's reinvented identity, her pattern of strategic relationships, her meetings with developers, her explicit targeting of Connor as access to the Malibu property. With each revelation, Aria's expression shifted from shock to anger to grim understanding. "She's a con artist," she concluded flatly. "And Connor's her mark." "Essentially, yes. Have you told him?" I shook my head. "He wouldn't believe me. You know how defensive he gets, especially about his relationships. He'd assume I was interfering, being overprotective." "So what's your plan?" Aria leaned forward, ever the pragmatist. "I assume you have one, or you wouldn't have asked me here." I smiled, appreciating her directness. "I've restructured the trust that holds the Malibu property. Effective immediately, it bypasses both you and Connor, transferring directly to your daughters upon my death, with you as trustee until they're 30. She blinked, absorbing this. "That's significant. Connor will be furious. Connor will eventually understand, if he's capable of growth." I took a sip of wine. "There's more. I've prepared a wedding gift for the happy couple. A comprehensive dossier on Scarlett's true intentions, along with the new trust documents. I'm delivering it tomorrow." Aria was silent for a long moment. "You realize this will likely end their marriage. That's rather the point. And possibly damage your relationship with Connor permanently." I met my daughter's concerned gaze steadily. "I'm willing to risk that to protect him from someone who sees him as nothing more than access to property and money. What kind of mother would I be if I stood by and allowed that?" Aria sighed, running a finger around the rim of her glass. "A less confrontational one, perhaps, but not a better one." She reached for my hand. "The girls and I will support whatever you decide. Just try to remember that Connor, for all his flaws, is still the little boy who used to fall asleep on your lap during movie nights." That image, Connor at 6, curled against me as we watched his grandfather's films, asking endless questions about how stories were made, sent an unexpected pang through my heart. When had that curious, affectionate child transformed into a man who would exclude his family from his wedding, then demand access to our most precious, shared space? The next morning, I put the final touches on my wedding gift. The package was deceptively beautiful. Heavy cream paper embossed with the Bradford family crest, tied with genuine silk ribbon. Inside the main box was a smaller one, an antique film canister that had once held the original print of my father's most famous screenplay. It seemed fitting to use it now for what might be the most dramatic scene of my own life. Within the canister, I arranged 3 items with careful precision. First, the newly executed trust documents establishing my granddaughters as the future owners of the Malibu property, with specific language prohibiting its sale or commercial development. Second, the comprehensive dossier on Scarlett Moore, her fabricated background, her pattern of relationships with industry men, transcripts of her conversations about using Connor to access the property, photographs of her meetings with developers, and detailed timelines proving she had targeted our family home before ever meeting my son. Third, a personal letter written in my own hand on the stationery my husband had given me for our last anniversary. Not a screed of anger or accusation, but something more powerful, the truth about legacy, about family, about the difference between possessions and heritage. As I sealed the package, I thought about what awaited on the other side of this decision. Connor's inevitable rage, Scarlett's exposed duplicity, the potential fracturing of what remained of our family bonds. But I also thought about what I was protecting. Not just a valuable piece of real estate, but the soul of our family. The place where my father had written words that moved millions, where my children had learned to swim and dream and believe in something larger than themselves, where my granddaughters would someday bring their own children to hear stories of their remarkable great-grandfather. Some things transcended the immediate pain of confrontation. Some legacies were worth fighting for, even at the cost of temporary peace. I called my most trusted driver, handed him the package with specific instructions, then settled in to wait. By this evening, Connor and his bride would know exactly who they were dealing with. Not a pushover matriarch easily manipulated, but a woman determined to protect what mattered most. The ocean seemed particularly restless today, waves crashing against the shore with thunderous determination. I watched from my terrace, a cup of tea cooling beside me, and prepared myself for the storm that would soon break over our family. Let it come. I had weathered worse. The call came at precisely 7:43 p.m. I know this because I was watching the antique grandfather clock in my living room, timing my breaths to its steady rhythm as I waited. When my phone lit up with Connor's name, I let it ring twice before answering, my voice deliberately calm. "Hello, Connor." What followed wasn't speech, but a cacophony. Scarlett's high-pitched screaming in the background, objects crashing, my son's voice strained beyond recognition. "What the hell did you do?" Connor's words finally cut through the chaos. "I sent a wedding gift," I replied evenly. "I take it you've opened it." "Are you insane?" "Scarlett is—" His voice cut off as another crash sounded, followed by more unintelligible screaming. "Having difficulty maintaining her composure, it seems," I observed. "Perhaps that's what happens when one's true intentions are exposed." "These allegations are completely false," he sputtered, but the uncertainty beneath his outrage was palpable. "You've fabricated this entire—" "I don't fabricate evidence, Connor. Everything in that dossier is meticulously documented. The transcripts, the photographs, the timeline. Your bride has been planning to use you to access the Malibu property from the moment she set eyes on it, before she ever met you, in fact." Another crash in the background. Scarlett's voice suddenly clearer. "That bitter old bitch! She can't prove anything." "Actually, I can," I murmured, though I doubted Connor could hear me over the commotion on his end. "And I already have." "The trust documents," Connor said, his voice dropping. "You changed the inheritance, cut me out completely. I protected the house from those who see it only as a commodity to be exploited." I kept my tone matter of fact, though my heart ached at the betrayal in his voice. "The property will pass to your nieces, with your sister as trustee, the girls who have spent every summer of their lives there, the next generation of our family. You had no right. I had every right. The house is mine, Connor, not yours, not yet, and now, not ever." The bluntness of my own words surprised me, but there was no gentler truth to offer. The background noise suddenly shifted, a door slamming, Scarlett's voice now distant, but still raised. Connor's breathing was heavy in my ear. "She's locked herself in the bathroom," he said, voice hollow. "Says she's calling her lawyer. Says we can fight this. She can certainly try." I allowed a hint of steel to enter my tone. "But I think you'll find I've been extremely thorough." Silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of complicated history. All the times I'd yielded to his demands, smoothed over his mistakes, prioritized his comfort over confronting his behavior. We had arrived at a precipice neither of us had seen coming, yet in retrospect seemed inevitable. "Did you know?" His voice was suddenly small, reminiscent of the little boy who would ask me to check under his bed for monsters. "When I called about the house, did you already suspect her?" "I suspected something wasn't right," I admitted. "The timing, the secrecy, the immediate demand for the house, it fit a pattern I've observed before." "In my relationships, you mean?" Bitterness crept into his tone. "Because I'm such a predictable failure at them. Because you've allowed yourself to be vulnerable to a certain type of manipulation," I corrected gently. "There's a difference." Another crash from his end, followed by Scarlett's voice, suddenly crystal clear as if she'd grabbed the phone. "You think you're so clever, don't you? You and your precious house and your Hollywood legacy. You're just a selfish old woman who can't stand seeing her son happy." I waited, unruffled by her outburst. When Connor reclaimed the phone, his voice was subdued. "Mom, Read the full dossier, Connor," I interrupted. "Look at the evidence with clear eyes. Then decide if this marriage is what you truly want. And if it is," a hint of his usual defiance returned, "if I choose her despite all this, then that is your choice to make. But it won't change mine regarding the house." I softened my tone slightly. "The door is always open for you as my son, but not for those who seek to exploit our family's legacy." After we hung up, I poured myself a small glass of the single malt scotch Richard had favored, carrying it out to the terrace. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. How many sunsets had I watched from this spot? Thousands, perhaps. Each one unique, each one a reminder that endings could be beautiful, even when tinged with melancholy. My phone chimed with a text from Arya. "Connor just called. Absolutely frantic. Said you've destroyed his life." "What happened?" I typed back quickly. "The wedding gift was delivered. It's going about as expected. I'll fill you in tomorrow." Her response came moments later. "The girls and I are coming early, arriving tomorrow instead of next week. You shouldn't be alone for the fallout." My throat tightened unexpectedly. Arya, always perceptive, always supportive, so like her father in the ways that mattered most. "Thank you," I replied simply. I was halfway through my scotch when the security system alerted me to a car approaching. The cameras showed a sleek red convertible speeding up my driveway, braking hard near the front entrance. Scarlett emerged alone, her movements sharp with fury, her face contorted in a way that would horrify any casting director. So she had decided on a direct confrontation. I hadn't expected her to leave Connor behind, but perhaps that was strategic, to appeal woman to woman, to attempt manipulation without him present. I remained on the terrace, watching through the security feed as she pounded on my front door. My housekeeper, Maria, answered with instructions I'd provided earlier for just this possibility. "Mrs. Bradford is not receiving visitors this evening." Maria's voice came clearly through the system. "I'm not a visitor, I'm family," Scarlett hissed. "Her daughter-in-law. Tell her to face me like a woman instead of hiding behind her files and spies." "Mrs. Bradford says you may make an appointment through her assistant tomorrow if you wish to discuss matters," Maria continued calmly. "Good evening, Ms. Moore." The use of her unmarried name was deliberate, a small twist of the knife, perhaps petty, but I allowed myself this minor indulgence. Scarlett's reaction was volcanic. She screamed obscenities that made even me, with my decades in Hollywood circles, raise an eyebrow. When Maria simply closed the door, Scarlett kicked it repeatedly before storming back to her car. But instead of leaving, she sat in the driver's seat, engine running, staring at the house with such intensity I could feel it through the camera feed. After several minutes, she pulled out her phone, her face illuminated by its glow as she typed furiously. My own phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "This isn't over. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I will have that house one way or another." I didn't dignify it with a response, instead forwarding the message to Theo and Margaret as additional evidence of Scarlett's character and intentions. Then I blocked the number, finished my scotch, and went inside to prepare for bed. As I moved through my evening routine, removing makeup, applying the face cream Richard had always teased me about. Does it actually work? It must, darling. Just look at me. Brushing my hair with the silver-handled brush that had been my mother's, I contemplated the storm I had deliberately unleashed. Connor would be angry for some time, perhaps a long time. Scarlett would certainly attempt retaliation, though her options were limited against someone with my resources and foresight. There would be unpleasantness, legal threats, perhaps even genuine attempts at litigation. But the house was secure, the legacy protected, my granddaughter's inheritance assured. As I slipped between the sheets, I thought of my father's favorite advice about screenwriting. The third act reveals the truth of who your characters really are, Rosie, not through their words, but through their choices under pressure. Connor's true character would be revealed in how he responded to this crisis. Would he cling to pride and a doomed marriage, or would he find the strength to acknowledge the manipulation and extricate himself? The choice was his. I had made mine. Sleep came surprisingly easily, deep and dreamless. The sleep of someone who has done what needed to be done, regardless of the cost. Arya arrived the next morning with my granddaughters in tow, the three of them bustling into the house with the energetic chaos that always made the place feel truly alive. Mia, 16, and already showing the intellectual intensity that had characterized her mother at that age, hugged me fiercely before announcing she needed to finish her summer reading on the deck. Zoe, 14 and perpetually in motion, immediately headed for the beach access stairs, surfboard under her arm. "The ocean calls," she explained with a grin that was pure Hartman charm. "Miss these waves all year, Grandma Rose." When the girls had dispersed, Arya fixed me with her penetrating gaze. "You look remarkably composed for someone who just detonated a nuclear bomb in the family." "Dramatic phrasing," I observed, leading her to the kitchen. "Coffee? Please. And don't deflect. Connor called me 4 times last night, each message more unhinged than the last. The final one included threats of contesting the trust, suing you for defamation, and, I quote, exposing decades of family secrets." I raised an eyebrow as I measured coffee grounds. Interesting threat from someone who barely remembers most family gatherings. What secrets does he imagine I have? I don't think he's thinking clearly. Arya leaned against the counter, watching me with our father's analytical eyes. Scarlett apparently spent the night alternating between hysterical sobbing and rage-filled plotting. "Sounds exhausting." "Mom," Arya's tone sharpened. "This is serious. She's threatening to go to the tabloids with stories about the family, about Dad, about Grandpa." I paused, then continued preparing the coffee with deliberate calm. Let her try. Felix Hartman's life has been documented in 3 biographies and countless articles. There are no scandals to unearth that haven't already been explored in tedious detail. And Dad? Your father was the most ethical man I've ever known. His reputation can withstand whatever fabrications she might invent. I poured water into the coffee maker. Besides, I have something Scarlett doesn't. What's that? Actual evidence. I smiled thinly. Should she choose to make false public accusations, I'm prepared to release the full dossier, including her recorded statements about targeting Connor specifically to access the house. Arya sighed, accepting the mug I offered her. "You've really thought of everything, haven't you?" "I've had to." I joined her at the kitchen island. "This isn't just about a house, Arya. It's about protecting what your grandfather built, what your father preserved, what I've maintained for this family, for your daughters." She was quiet for a moment, sipping her coffee. "And Connor? Where does he fit into this legacy you're protecting?" The question pierced deeper than I'd expected. Connor has always been included in the legacy, just not in the way he wants. He's chosen a path that prioritizes immediate gratification over lasting value. I can't force him to make different choices, but I can ensure those choices don't endanger what matters most. He's still your son, and I still love him. I met her gaze steadily. That hasn't changed. It won't change. But love doesn't require capitulation to harmful demands. Before Arya could respond, my phone rang. Margaret Chen's office. "Rosalind," Margaret began without preamble, "Scarlett Moore has retained Julius Hammond as counsel. They're threatening a lawsuit for alienation of affection, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Julius Hammond, a flamboyant attorney known for representing celebrities in messy divorces and aggressively pursuing settlements to avoid public trials. His involvement suggested Scarlett was aiming for a quick financial resolution rather than protracted legal battles. "Let me guess," I replied. "They're offering to drop all claims in exchange for a substantial settlement? $2 million to be precise, and access to the Malibu house for 6 months per year." I actually laughed. "Ambitious, isn't she? What's your assessment?" "Their case is weak at best. The evidence you've compiled is substantial and properly obtained. Additionally, truth is an absolute defense against defamation claims." Margaret's tone was clinically precise. "However, they're banking on your desire to avoid public spectacle. A miscalculation on their part." I watched through the window as my granddaughters moved about the property. Mia now settled on the deck with her book, Zoe visible in the distance riding a wave. "I've spent my entire adult life in Hollywood circles. Public spectacle doesn't frighten me. So I should inform them we're prepared to defend against any legal action?" "Absolutely. And Margaret, make it clear that should they proceed, we're prepared to countersue for attempted fraud and submit all evidence to the district attorney for potential criminal charges." After ending the call, I turned to find Arya watching me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're formidable when provoked," she observed. "I sometimes forget that beneath the elegant hostess exterior beats the heart of a woman who once faced down studio executives to protect Dad's critical integrity." I smiled at the memory. Richard had written a scathing review of a big-budget film produced by one of Hollywood's most powerful men. The producer had threatened to end my husband's career, showing up at our door to intimidate him directly. I had been the one to send him away with a promise that if he pursued his threats, I would ensure every journalist in town heard exactly what he'd attempted. "I learned long ago that bullies rely on their target's fear of confrontation," I said. "Remove that fear, and they typically retreat. And if Scarlett doesn't retreat, if she actually follows through with legal action or tabloid stories, then we'll face that challenge as it comes." I refreshed my coffee. "But I suspect once she realizes I won't be intimidated into a settlement, she'll cut her losses and move on to another target. Her type usually does." "And Connor?" The question lingered between us, the heart of the matter, the true complication. "That," I admitted, "I can't predict. Connor makes decisions based on emotion rather than reason. Always has. Whether he'll recognize Scarlett's manipulation or commit himself further to defending it, only time will tell." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone chimed with a text from Connor. "We need to talk. Alone. Today." I showed Arya the message. "Are you going to see him?" she asked. "Of course." I typed a quick response. "Come for dinner. 7 p.m. Just the two of us. He's my son, regardless of the current circumstances. Would you like me to take the girls somewhere else for the evening?" I shook my head. "No need to disrupt their first day here. Connor and I can speak privately in the study. Besides," I added with a faint smile, "having you all here reminds him what family actually means." As Arya headed outside to check on her daughters, I found myself pausing at the collection of family photographs lining the hallway. Connor at 8, proudly holding up a fish he'd caught off the dock. Connor at 12, sitting cross-legged beside his grandfather as Felix explained camera angles. Connor at 18, reluctantly posing in his graduation cap. Connor at 30, accepting his first Grammy Award. Somewhere in that progression, the bright-eyed boy who had once followed his grandfather like a shadow had disappeared, replaced by a man chasing external validation with increasing desperation. I hadn't fully noticed the transformation as it happened, a failure that I would always regret. I touched the frame of the fishing photo lightly. "Oh, Connor," I murmured to the grinning child captured there. "What happened to you?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable yet persistent, as I turned to prepare for the confrontation that evening would surely bring. I chose my attire carefully for Connor's visit, not the casual elegance I typically wore around the house, but a more deliberate ensemble. The sapphire silk blouse Richard had given me for our last anniversary, pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother, and the subtle Cartier watch my father had presented to me when his first screenplay sold. Armor of a sort, these physical connections to those who had loved me without condition or expectation. At precisely 6:58 p.m., the security system announced Connor's arrival. I watched on the monitor as he sat in his car for several moments, seemingly gathering resolve before approaching the house. His posture was rigid, his movements lacking their usual casual confidence. I opened the door before he could ring the bell. "Connor?" I greeted him, voice steady. "Come in." He stepped inside, eyes darting around the entryway, as if expecting an ambush. "Where is everyone?" "Arya took the girls to dinner in town. I thought we should speak privately." He nodded stiffly, following me through to the kitchen where I'd prepared a simple meal. The spaghetti carbonara he'd favored throughout his childhood, crusty bread, a bottle of the Barolo he preferred, small gestures of maternal memory that seemed to catch him off guard. "You cooked," he observed, surprise momentarily displacing his defensive posture. "I still remember how." I gestured toward the table, already set for two. "Shall we?" For several minutes we engaged in the performance of a normal dinner, serving food, pouring wine, the mechanical motions of knives and forks against plates. The silence stretched between us, taut with unspoken accusations. Connor broke first, setting down his fork with a sharp click. "I want to understand why you did it." "Did what, specifically?" I took a deliberate sip of wine. "Investigated the woman who married my son without my knowledge, protected the family home from someone plotting to exploit it, altered my estate plans to ensure my granddaughter's inheritance. All of it." His voice tightened. "The whole calculated attack on my marriage. Not your marriage, Connor. Scarlett's deception." I set my glass down carefully. "There's a difference. You don't know her. Not really. Those recordings, those meetings, there could be explanations you haven't considered." Hope flared briefly in my chest. If he was reaching for alternative explanations, perhaps he wasn't completely lost to Scarlett's manipulation. "What explanations would justify her discussing you as a perfect target?" I asked gently. "Or planning to convert the house to a boutique hotel? Or strategizing how to access the property before she ever met you?" He flinched visibly. "She says those recordings are taken out of context, that your investigator edited them to make her look bad. Then she's adding lies to her existing deception." I reached for the small tablet I'd placed on the sideboard, sliding it toward him. "The complete, unedited recordings are here. Listen for yourself. The context is quite clear." Connor stared at the tablet without touching it, conflict evident in every line of his face. "She's my wife. She's a con artist who targeted you specifically for access to property and money. You never gave her a chance." Anger flared suddenly. "You never even met her before sending that dossier. That's not how a mother treats her son's wife." "You never gave me the chance to meet her," I countered evenly. "You announced your marriage as a fait accompli, then immediately demanded access to the house. Those aren't the actions of a son who values his mother's blessing." He pushed back from the table, standing abruptly. "This is useless. You've already decided she's guilty. Nothing I say will change your mind." "That's not true." I remained seated, maintaining my composure with effort. "I would be delighted to be proven wrong. Show me evidence that contradicts what I've discovered. Explain the recordings in a way that makes sense. Help me understand why my son would exclude his family from his wedding, then immediately demand access to his mother's home. Because I knew you'd judge her." The words burst from him. "Just like you've judged every woman I've ever been with. Too ambitious, too shallow, too young, too interested in my connections. Nobody is ever good enough for your precious son." The accusation stung, primarily because it contained a kernel of truth. I had been skeptical of Connor's romantic choices over the years, though I'd tried to keep my reservations private. "I've never wanted anything but your happiness," I said softly. "But I won't stand by while someone exploits you, uses you to get to this house, to this family's legacy." "Legacy, legacy, legacy." He spat the word like a curse. "That's all you care about. Grandpa's precious reputation, Dad's critical standing, your perfect family image. What about what I want? What about my choices?" "Your choices affect more than just you, Connor. They affect everyone who cares about you, everyone who shares this family's history. The house isn't just yours," he insisted, circling back to the core of his grievance. "Dad would have wanted me to have my share." "Your father," I replied with careful precision, "wanted this house to remain in the family, as a home, not to be sold off or commercialized. The trust I've established ensures exactly that. By cutting me out completely, by protecting it from those who see it only as a commodity." I finally stood, meeting his gaze directly. "Including your wife, who has explicitly stated her intentions to turn it into a hotel once I'm gone." He flinched again, another small tell that part of him recognized the truth in my words. "Listen to the recordings, Connor. I urged. Read the full report. Look at the evidence with clear eyes. Then ask yourself if this marriage is truly what you want, or if it's another impulsive decision made from a place of insecurity. Don't psychoanalyze me. His voice hardened. I'm not one of Grandpa's characters for you to dissect. No, you're my son, whom I've loved from the moment you drew breath, whom I've supported through every triumph and mistake, whom I'm trying, perhaps imperfectly, to protect, even now. Something flickered in his expression. Doubt, confusion, a momentary crack in his defensive facade. Then his phone chimed with a text, and the moment shattered. He glanced at the screen, his face tightening. Scarlett, she's waiting for me. Of course she is. I couldn't quite keep the weariness from my voice. She wants to know what I've said, what I've offered, what leverage she might still have. That's not... He stopped, uncertainty creeping into his expression again. She's just concerned. Take the tablet, Connor. Listen to the recordings away from her influence. Make your decision based on facts, not emotions manipulated by someone who sees you as a means to an end. He hesitated, then picked up the tablet. This doesn't change anything. I still think what you did was cruel and unnecessary. I can accept that judgment if it means you'll examine the evidence. I moved toward him, risking a gentle touch on his arm. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I love you too much to watch you be exploited without at least trying to open your eyes. For a brief moment, I thought he might embrace me. His body language shifted, softened. Then another text chimed, and the moment passed. I have to go, he said stiffly. Scarlett's waiting. She usually is, I murmured. At the door, he paused. Julius Hammond contacted you? He did. $2 million and 6 months annual access to the house was the proposed settlement, I believe. Connor's expression confirmed he hadn't known the specific demands. Another small crack in Scarlett's facade. The girls are happy to be here, I added, deliberately changing the subject. Zoe's already been surfing. Mia's halfway through The Great Gatsby on the deck. A fleeting smile touched his lips. He'd always had a special bond with his nieces, despite his generally self-absorbed lifestyle. Tell them I'll see them soon. I will. After he left, I cleared the barely touched dinner, wrapping his portion for later, though I doubted he would return for it. The house felt cavernous suddenly, despite knowing Arya and the girls would be back soon. I poured myself another glass of wine and stepped out onto the terrace, breathing in the salt air as darkness settled over the ocean. What would you do, Richard? I asked the empty space beside me, a habit I'd developed in the years since his death. What would you tell your son? No answer came, of course. Just the eternal rhythm of waves against shore, the distant call of a seabird, the whisper of wind through palm fronds. Yet somehow, in that symphony of familiar sounds, I found a measure of peace. Connor had taken the tablet. He would listen to the recordings, read the reports, see the evidence with his own eyes. Whether that would be enough to break through Scarlett's manipulation remained to be seen. But I had done what I could. The rest would unfold as it must, with or without my intervention. I raised my glass to the darkening horizon, a toast to uncertainty and hope in equal measure. I was having breakfast with Arya and the girls when Theo called the next morning. Mrs. Bradford, I thought you should know immediately. Scarlett Moore has been making some concerning moves. I excused myself, stepping onto the terrace for privacy. What kind of moves? She visited 3 tabloid journalists yesterday. Based on my sources, she's shopping a story about Felix Hartman having fathered an illegitimate child in the 1960s who was allegedly paid off to disappear. She's claiming to have documentation. The accusation was so absurd, I nearly laughed. That's impossible. My father's life was scrutinized by multiple biographers. There was no secret child. I agree it's likely fabricated, but tabloids aren't particularly concerned with verification if the story's sensational enough. I considered this calculated attack, not just on me, but on my father's legacy. Can you obtain copies of whatever documentation she's claiming to have? Already working on it. There's more, though. She's also been in contact with Horizon Developers, the company that specializes in acquiring beachfront properties for hotel conversions. A chill ran through me despite the morning warmth. For what purpose? Unclear at present, but my source indicates she presented herself as having imminent access to your property and authority to discuss preliminary assessments. I thanked Theo, asking him to continue monitoring the situation, then called Margaret immediately. I need to send cease and desist letters to several tabloids and Horizon Developers, I explained, after outlining what Theo had discovered. And I want to formally notify Horizon that any discussions with Scarlett Moore regarding my property are fraudulent. I'll draft them immediately, Margaret assured me. And I'd suggest we prepare for the possibility that she'll escalate to actual defamation. We should have a response strategy ready. After ending the call, I remained on the terrace, watching my granddaughters on the beach below. Zoe was attempting to teach Mia to surf, both of them laughing as Mia tumbled into the gentle waves. The sight centered me, a reminder of what truly mattered beyond the current drama. Arya joined me, coffee cup in hand. More complications. I briefed her on Scarlett's latest maneuvers. Her expression darkened with each detail. She's despicable, Arya concluded. Attacking Grandpa's reputation with manufactured scandals? That crosses a line. It's a desperate move, I agreed. She's losing control of the narrative and striking out however she can. Have you heard from Connor since last night? I shook my head. Not yet, but he took the tablet with the complete evidence. He'll listen to it eventually, even if just to try disproving it. And when he can't? Arya's voice held a rare edge. When he realizes you were right about her? Then he'll have a difficult choice to make. I watched a pelican dive into the ocean, emerging with its prize. And we'll need to be there for him, regardless of how he handles it. We spent the morning engaged in normal family activities, a deliberate choice to maintain stability for the girls amid the unfolding situation. I taught Mia to make my mother's famous cinnamon rolls while Arya took Zoe shopping for a new wetsuit. The rhythms of ordinary life continued despite the extraordinary circumstances surrounding us. Shortly after noon, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. Mrs. Bradford? A young woman's voice, hesitant but determined. This is Vanessa Diaz. I was Scarlett's friend. The name registered immediately. The friend featured in several of the recorded conversations discussing the plan to target Connor and access the house. Yes, Ms. Diaz, I know who you are. I need to talk to you. About Scarlett. About what she's planning now. 20 minutes later, Vanessa arrived at the house, a striking young woman in her mid-20s with an anxious energy that manifested in constantly adjusting her jewelry as she sat across from me in the living room. I want to be clear, she began. I'm not doing this out of loyalty to you or your son. Scarlett and I had a falling out last night. She's gone too far. In what way? I kept my tone neutral, revealing nothing. She wants me to notarize forged documents, supposed letters between your father and this woman he allegedly had a child with. Letters she created using AI to mimic his writing style, with details pulled from his biographies to make them seem authentic. I raised an eyebrow. And you were unwilling to commit criminal fraud? Vanessa flinched. I've done some questionable things, but forgery that could be traced directly to me? No. That's how people end up in prison. A wise assessment. I studied her carefully. What else is she planning? She's meeting with developers tomorrow, claiming she has power of attorney over your affairs due to your declining mental state. She's created a fake document for that too. The audacity was breathtaking. And Connor? What does he know of these plans? Vanessa shifted uncomfortably. She's keeping him insulated, telling him you're launching a smear campaign against her that she needs to defend against, that the meetings are with PR specialists and lawyers to protect their reputation. And he believes this? She hesitated. I think he wants to believe it, but last night, after he came back from dinner with you, I heard them arguing. He was asking about recordings, about meetings with developers. She was crying, saying you had fabricated everything to break them up. Did he seem convinced by her explanations? Not entirely. Vanessa twisted her ring nervously. That's partly why she's accelerating her plans. She's afraid she's losing her grip on him. I absorbed this information, assessing its reliability. Why are you telling me this, Ms. Diaz? The real reason. She met my gaze directly for the first time. Scarlett and I have worked together before. Small cons, strategic relationships with industry men, nothing major. But this, targeting your family, fabricating scandals, forging documents, it's crossing into territory that could have serious legal consequences. I'm not going down with her. Self-preservation, then, not altruism. Still, the information was valuable. Do you have copies of these forged documents? I asked. She nodded, reaching into her purse to extract a manila envelope. The fake power of attorney, the fabricated letters, screenshots of her communications with the tabloids and developers. I accepted the envelope without opening it. You realize that by providing these, you're implicating yourself in the conspiracy up to this point. I do. She straightened her shoulders. That's why I want immunity if this ever goes to court. I'm cooperating now, before any of the more serious fraud actually happens. I'll have my attorney draw up an agreement to that effect, I promised, already mentally composing the message to Margaret. In the meantime, I'd suggest distancing yourself from Scarlett completely. Already done. I moved out of our apartment last night. She stood, clearly eager to leave. One more thing you should know. She's meeting Connor for lunch at Nobu today. She's planning to convince him to sign a document granting her authority to negotiate regarding the house while he focuses on an emergency work situation she's manufactured. Some crisis with a major client that will conveniently keep him distracted for the next week. After Vanessa left, I immediately called Theo to verify her account and Margaret to begin legal countermeasures. Then, after a moment's consideration, I made one more call to Connor. He answered with obvious reluctance. Mom, I'm about to head into a lunch meeting. With Scarlett at Nobu, I completed. I know, I won't keep you long. I just wanted to ask if you've had a chance to review the materials I gave you. A pause. Some of it. I've been busy with a client emergency. A sudden crisis that requires your immediate attention, pulling you away from other concerns? I kept my tone conversational. How convenient. His breathing changed. A slight hitch that told me my words had struck a nerve. What are you implying? Nothing. Just an observation on timing. I shifted to the real purpose of my call. Connor, whatever document Scarlett asks you to sign today, regarding the house, regarding me, regarding anything of significance, I strongly suggest you read it very carefully. Perhaps even have your own attorney review it first. How did you... He stopped himself. You're having her followed. I'm protecting my interests, I corrected gently, as you should protect yours. After a long silence, he spoke again, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. The recordings, they're real, aren't they? Unedited. Completely authentic, I confirmed, as is everything else in that file. Another pause. I need to go. Of course. Enjoy your lunch. As I ended the call, Arya appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. What's happening now? I summarized Vanessa's visit and my conversation with Connor, watching understanding dawn in my daughter's eyes. He's starting to see it, she observed. The truth about her. Perhaps I wasn't ready to claim victory, or perhaps he's just experiencing reasonable doubt. Either way, I've given him a warning. What he does with it is his choice. We were preparing dinner when the security system announced an approaching vehicle. The cameras showed Connor's Porsche speeding up the driveway, braking hard near the entrance. He emerged alone, his movements radiating a barely contained fury that reminded me painfully of his father in rare moments of genuine anger. I met him at the door, bracing myself for whatever storm he brought with him. She tried to trick me into signing power of attorney, he said without preamble, his voice tight with controlled rage. A document granting her authority to act on my behalf in all matters relating to family property. Buried in legal language about mutual representation during professional obligations. Relief washed through me, though I kept my expression neutral. I see. No, you don't. He pushed past me into the house. Because that's not even the worst part. When I questioned it, when I insisted on reading the document thoroughly, she had a complete meltdown. Started accusing me of not trusting her, of letting you manipulate me. He paced the entryway like a caged animal. And then her phone rang. And I saw it, the screen notification. Horizon Developers, confirming tomorrow's meeting about the Malibu property. I said nothing, allowing him to process his own revelation. Everything you said, everything in those recordings, it's all true, isn't it? His voice cracked slightly. She never loved me. She just wanted... He gestured around us, at the house, at the legacy it represented. I'm so sorry, Connor, I said softly. He turned to me. Raw pain etched across his features. How did I not see it? How was I so blind? Because she targeted your vulnerabilities precisely. Because she studied you, studied this family, before ever accidentally meeting you. Because she's very, very good at what she does. He sank onto the stairs, head in his hands. I've been such a fool. I sat beside him, not touching, but close enough to offer comfort if he sought it. You've been a man who wanted to be loved. There's no shame in that desire. For several minutes we sat in silence, the weight of revelation heavy between us. Then Connor straightened, a new determination replacing the shattered anger in his expression. I need your help, Mom, to end this, to undo what I've done. I covered his hand with mine, feeling the first tentative bridge being rebuilt between us. Of course, that's what family is for. Connor stayed in the guest room that night, the first time he'd slept under this roof in nearly 2 years. I heard him pacing well past midnight, his footsteps a restless rhythm above my bedroom. When morning came, he appeared in the kitchen, looking haggard but resolute, the boyish charm that had defined him for decades stripped away to reveal something harder, more defined. I've been ignoring her calls and texts, he said, accepting the coffee I offered. There were 37 overnight, increasingly frantic. What do you want to do? I asked, giving him the space to direct what came next. He met my gaze directly. End it, completely. But I need to understand exactly what I'm dealing with first. He gestured to the folder Vanessa had provided. May I? I slid it across the counter. It's not pleasant reading. For the next hour, Connor reviewed everything. The forged power of attorney document, the fabricated letters allegedly from Felix Hartman, the screenshots of Scarlett's communications with tabloids and developers. With each page, his expression hardened further. She was planning to declare you mentally incompetent, he said finally, his voice flat with controlled anger. To have me granted conservatorship, then transfer control to herself through this fraudulent power of attorney. Yes. And to smear Grandpa's reputation with these fake love letters and a non-existent, illegitimate child. Yes, he closed the folder with deliberate care. I want her gone. From my life, from this family, from this house, permanently. That can be arranged, I replied, relief and sadness mingling as I watched my son confront the consequences of his impulsivity. Margaret has already prepared divorce papers citing fraud and misrepresentation. They can be filed today. Do it. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. And the tabloids? The developers? All her other schemes? Cease and desist letters have been sent. Horizon Developers has been formally notified that Scarlett has no authority regarding this property. Margaret is preparing a formal complaint to the district attorney regarding the attempted fraud and forgery. Connor nodded, a flicker of admiration breaking through his grim expression. You've been 3 steps ahead this entire time, haven't you? I've had to be. I kept my tone gentle, not wanting to sound accusatory. When you exclude family from major life decisions, we're forced to react rather than participate. He flinched at the subtle rebuke. I know. I should have. He trailed off, shaking his head. There are a lot of things I should have done differently. Before I could respond, the security system alerted us to an approaching vehicle, a taxi turning into our driveway. The cameras showed Scarlett emerging, her usually perfect appearance notably disheveled, her movements sharp with agitation. She's here. Connor straightened, squaring his shoulders. I'll handle this. Are you sure? Absolutely. His jaw set with determination. I need to do this myself. I nodded, respecting his decision while privately activating the house's recording system, a security measure installed after a particularly persistent paparazzo had trespassed years ago. Whatever confrontation was about to unfold, it would be documented. Connor met Scarlett at the door before she could ring the bell. I remained in the kitchen, out of sight, but able to hear through the open concept design of the main floor. Connor, thank God! Scarlett's voice dripped with calculated relief. I've been so worried. Why aren't you answering my calls? What are you doing here? I think you know exactly why I'm here. His tone was cold, controlled in a way I'd rarely heard from my impulsive son. The game is over, Scarlett. Game? What are you talking about? Baby, if this is about that document yesterday, I told you it was just standard legal language my attorney recommended. Stop. The single word cut through her performance. I've seen everything. The recordings of you planning to target me for access to this house. The forged power of attorney. The fake letters supposedly from my grandfather. Your meetings with developers to convert this property into a hotel. A beat of silence, then a dramatic shift in tone. That bitch. Your mother manufactured all of that to turn you against me. And you're actually believing her? Vanessa provided copies of everything, including the texts between you two planning how to, quote, separate the son from the Bradford fortune. Another pause, longer this time. When Scarlett spoke again, the pretense of wounded innocence had vanished entirely. Fine, so what? You think you're special? The talented Connor Bradford, music producer to the stars? You were a mark, honey. A pathetically easy one, so desperate for validation, you never once questioned why someone like me would be interested in someone like you. The cruelty of her words made me wince, maternal instinct urging me to intervene, to shield my son from this deliberate attempt to wound. But this was Connor's battle to fight, his reckoning to face. You're right, his calm response surprised me. I was an easy mark, insecure, impulsive, so focused on appearances, I couldn't see what was right in front of me. That's on me. So what now? Scarlett's voice took on a calculating edge. You run back to mommy, file for divorce, pretend this never happened? It's not that simple. I'm your wife. I have rights. You have nothing. Connor's tone remained steady. The marriage was based on fraud and misrepresentation. The prenup you insisted wasn't necessary works against you now. And there won't be any settlement to negotiate when the DA sees evidence of your attempted forgery and fraud. You wouldn't dare. A note of genuine alarm entered her voice. I'll destroy you in the press. Your reputation, your family's legacy. I'll burn it all down. With what? The fake scandal you fabricated about my grandfather? The forged documents you created? Go ahead and try. Every tabloid has already received legal notice that you're peddling fraudulent stories. Every developer has been notified that you have no authority regarding this property. You son of a... Careful, Connor interrupted, his voice dropping dangerously. That's my mother you're about to insult. The woman you dismissed as an old lady who wouldn't live forever, who turns out to be considerably more formidable than either of us fully appreciated. Pride swelled in my chest at his words. Not just the defense of me, but the recognition of his own underestimation. Perhaps there was hope for my son yet. This isn't over, Scarlett hissed. You think you've won? You've made an enemy you can't afford, Connor Bradford. No, what I've done is recognize a mistake before it cost me everything that actually matters. His voice softened slightly. You know what's sad? If you'd actually taken the time to know me, the real me, not just the path to this house, you might have discovered I would have given you anything freely. Love makes me generous. Manipulation makes me resolve the prenup didn't anticipate. You'll regret this, she spat. Both of you will. The only thing I regret is not listening to my family in the first place. The sound of the front door opening punctuated his words. Goodbye, Scarlett. Divorce papers will be delivered today. Don't come back here, ever. The door closed with finality, followed by the sound of the taxi departing. For several moments, silence filled the house. Then Connor appeared in the kitchen doorway, his expression a complex mixture of pain, relief, and something I hadn't seen in years, a quiet dignity reminiscent of his father. Well, he said simply, that's done. I opened my arms without a word, and for the first time since he was a teenager, my son stepped into my embrace without hesitation or pretense. He shuddered once, a physical release of tension before pulling back to meet my gaze. I'm sorry, Mom, for everything, for not trusting you, for excluding you from my life, for demanding the house without regard for what it means to this family. I know, I said softly, and I forgive you. Just like that? Disbelief colored his voice. Forgiveness doesn't mean there aren't consequences, or that trust is immediately restored, I clarified. It just means I'm willing to move forward without holding your mistakes against you indefinitely. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning. The trust documents. The ones giving the house to Mia and Zoe eventually. That's not changing, is it? No. I kept my tone gentle but firm. Some decisions are made for the long-term protection of what matters most. The house will remain in the family, but not as an asset to be leveraged or sold. That was always your father's wish, and mine. Instead of the anger I half expected, Connor simply nodded again. I understand, finally. From the deck outside came the sound of laughter, Arya and the girls returning from their morning beach walk, blissfully unaware of the confrontation that had just transpired. Life continuing in its imperfect, beautiful way. Shall we join them? I suggested. Family breakfast on the terrace? Connor smiled. A genuine smile that reached his eyes, reminiscent of the boy he'd once been. I'd like that, very much. As we stepped outside into the golden California sunshine, I felt a weight lifting, not completely gone, but significantly lightened. The house still stood, the legacy protected, And my son, perhaps, finally beginning to understand what truly mattered. The legal machinery moved with surprising efficiency once set in motion. Margaret filed the divorce papers that afternoon, citing fraud and misrepresentation as grounds. By evening, Scarlett had been served at the luxury hotel where she'd retreated after the confrontation. Her response was predictably volatile, a flurry of threatening texts to Connor, followed by a formal statement from Julius Hammond, declaring their intent to contest the divorce and seek substantial compensation for emotional distress and reputational damage. Empty threats, Margaret assured us during a conference call. The evidence of her fraudulent intentions is overwhelming. No judge will award her significant compensation once they review the recordings and forged documents. Connor, sitting beside me in the study, nodded grimly. The past 24 hours had aged him visibly, stripping away the carefree facade he'd maintained for decades. What about the criminal aspects? The forgery attempts? The fraud? The district attorney is reviewing our complaint, Margaret explained. Given the substantial evidence and Vanessa Diaz's cooperation, I expect they'll pursue charges. However, prosecution will likely offer a plea deal. Probation, perhaps, rather than jail time, assuming Scarlett has no prior criminal record. After the call ended, Connor remained staring at the speakerphone, lost in thought. I still can't believe I fell for it. All of it. She was very skilled at targeting your specific vulnerabilities, I reminded him. That's what professional manipulators do. But to marry her? Without even introducing her to my family first? He shook his head in disgust. What was I thinking? That's the problem. You weren't thinking. You were feeling, responding to the validation and admiration she strategically provided. I kept my tone gentle, analytical, rather than accusatory. It's a pattern you might consider exploring with professional help. He glanced up sharply. A therapist, you mean? It could be beneficial. I hesitated, then decided complete honesty was necessary. Connor, this isn't the first time you've been drawn to someone who ultimately wanted to use you rather than love you. It might be worth understanding why that pattern repeats. Instead of the defensive reaction I half expected, he simply nodded. You're right. I know you're right. A rueful smile touched his lips. Dad would have said the same thing, wouldn't he? Probably with more literary references and less diplomacy, I agreed, returning his smile. He always said you had his artistic temperament, but lacked his analytical filter. He was right about that too. Connor stood, moving to the window that overlooked the ocean. I've made such a mess of things, Mom. Not just with Scarlett, but with us, with this family. Messes can be cleaned up, I replied. It's one of the advantages of being alive. We get the chance to repair what we've damaged. Our conversation was interrupted by Mia, appearing in the doorway, her expression serious beyond her 16 years. Grandma, there's someone on the news talking about us, about great-grandpa. We followed her to the living room, where Arya and Zoe were already watching the television, with identical frowns of concentration. On screen, Scarlett stood before a cluster of microphones, Julius Hammond at her side, delivering what appeared to be a prepared statement. Forced out of my marital home by my mother-in-law's manipulative tactics, she was saying, her expression a perfect mask of wounded dignity. While I seek justice through legal channels, I feel compelled to share certain truths about the Bradford family that have long been suppressed. Connor's intake of breath was sharp beside me. She's actually doing it, going public with those fabricated stories. I placed a calming hand on his arm, watching Scarlett with clinical detachment as she launched into allegations about my father's secret child and hidden correspondence that supposedly proved his double life. We have copies of letters written by Felix Hartman himself, she claimed, acknowledging his illegitimate daughter and arranging financial support in exchange for silence. These documents reveal the hypocrisy behind the Bradford family's carefully constructed public image. Those are the forgeries, Connor explained to Arya and the girls, created using AI to mimic Grandpa Felix's writing style. How do we stop this? Arya asked, her protective instinct toward our family legacy evident in her tense posture. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Theo. I assume you're watching the press conference, he began without preamble. You should know we've identified Scarlett's documentation source. A woman named Patricia Lawson is claiming to be Felix Hartman's illegitimate daughter, with letters to prove it. Who is she actually? I asked, unsurprised by this new development. An actress from Scarlett's former acting workshop, 62 years old, extensive background in regional theater, financially struggling based on her credit report. Scarlett approached her 3 days ago with this scheme. So they found someone the right age to play the role of my father's supposed daughter, I concluded. Convenient. Indeed. But here's where it gets interesting. Ms. Lawson's mother actually did work as a script supervisor at Paramount in the late 1950s, which gives her story just enough plausibility to make tabloids bite. I thanked Theo for the information, then turned back to my anxious family. It seems Scarlett has escalated to hiring an actress to portray my father's non-existent, illegitimate child. Connor struggled for words, his face flushed with anger. That's beyond despicable. It's also ultimately futile, I assured them all. My father's life has been thoroughly documented by multiple biographers. There were no secret children, no hidden correspondence. The truth will prevail. But in the meantime, great-grandpa's reputation is being dragged through the mud, Mia protested, her teenage sense of justice inflamed. We can't just wait for the truth to come out eventually. We won't, I promised, an idea taking shape. Aria, call the University Archive Department. Connor, contact your friend at the Academy Museum. I need to speak with Margaret again. As my family dispersed to make the requested calls, I stood alone before the television where Scarlett continued her performance, Julius Hammond nodding gravely beside her as she detailed the emotional distress caused by her unjust treatment at the hands of the Bradford family. You've miscalculated, my dear, I murmured to her image. Badly. Within hours, our counter-strategy was in motion. The University of Southern California, where my father's complete papers were archived, issued a formal statement confirming that Felix Hartman's correspondence, financial records, and personal journals had been thoroughly cataloged and contained no evidence of any illegitimate children or secret financial arrangements. The Academy Museum, which housed an extensive collection of my father's screenplays, production notes, and personal effects, announced a special exhibition celebrating his legacy, including previously unreleased home movies and correspondence that documented his devoted family life in comprehensive detail. Most devastatingly, Margaret arranged for 3 of Felix Hartman's biographers to appear on entertainment news programs, systematically dismantling Scarlett's claims with scholarly precision and historical evidence. By evening, the narrative had shifted dramatically. Entertainment blogs that had initially reported Scarlett's sensational claims were now questioning her credibility and motives. Several noted the convenient timing of her allegations immediately following divorce proceedings based on fraud. The coup de grace came from an unexpected source, Patricia Lawson herself, who contacted a major entertainment website to recant her claims, admitting she had been paid to portray Felix Hartman's daughter and provided with forged letters to support her story. Ms. Moore assured me it was just a negotiating tactic, she confessed in the published interview. A way to pressure the Bradford family into a settlement. I never intended to cause harm to Felix Hartman's legacy or memory. When the district attorney's office announced the following morning that they were investigating Scarlett Moore for attempted fraud, forgery, and potential witness tampering, Julius Hammond withdrew as her counsel, citing irreconcilable differences regarding case strategy. We were having lunch on the terrace when Connor received a text from Scarlett, her first communication since the spectacular collapse of her tabloid strategy. She wants to meet, he said, staring at his phone with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. Says she's willing to sign the divorce papers without contest if I can call off the legal dogs regarding potential criminal charges. That's not actually within your power, Aria pointed out. The DA pursues charges based on evidence, not the victim's preferences. Besides, I added, agreeing to such a meeting would only give her another opportunity to manipulate or create a narrative that serves her purposes. Connor nodded slowly. You're right, both of you. He typed a brief response, then set his phone aside with finality. I told her to communicate through attorneys from now on, that any further direct contact will be added to the restraining order Margaret is preparing. Good for you, Aria said approvingly. It's strange, he mused, gazing out at the ocean. A week ago, I thought I was in love with her, ready to start a life together. Now I can barely remember what that felt like. It's like waking from a particularly vivid but ultimately meaningless dream. Some dreams fade quickly in the light of day, I observed, especially those built on illusion rather than substance. Below us on the beach, Mia and Zoe were collecting shells, their animated conversation carried up to us on the breeze. The sight of them, These remarkable young women who represented our family's future filled me with profound gratitude that the crisis had been averted, the legacy protected for their eventual inheritance. "I've been thinking," Connor said, following my gaze to his nieces, "about what you said, about getting professional help to understand my patterns. And I found a therapist, starting next week." He offered a self-deprecating smile. "Apparently there's a waiting list for entertainment industry professionals with narcissistic tendencies and boundary issues." The gentle self-mockery, so reminiscent of his father's humor, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "I'm proud of you, Connor." He reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Thanks, Mom, for everything, for seeing what I couldn't see, for fighting for what matters when I was too blind to recognize its value." As we sat there, the three of us enjoying the simple pleasure of family lunch in the home that had witnessed so many chapters of our shared story, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The storm hadn't destroyed us. If anything, it had strengthened the foundations that truly mattered. "To new beginnings," Arya proposed, raising her glass in a toast. "And old wisdom," Connor added, joining the gesture. I raised my own glass, heart full. "To family, the real thing. 6 months can change everything, or nothing at all." In our case, it was somewhere in between. Autumn arrived with golden light that transformed the Malibu coastline, casting long shadows across the terrace where I sat reviewing the final divorce decree. Connor's marriage to Scarlett was officially over, dissolved with remarkable efficiency once she realized the futility of fighting against the overwhelming evidence of her deception. The criminal charges had been resolved through a plea agreement, 2 years probation, community service, and a restraining order preventing her from contacting any member of the Bradford family. A relatively light sentence, but one that achieved our primary goal, removing her from our lives permanently. More importantly, these 6 months had brought healing, gradual, imperfect, but genuine nonetheless. Connor had committed to his therapy with unexpected dedication, exploring the insecurities and patterns that had made him vulnerable to manipulation. He'd moved into a smaller house in Venice Beach, deliberately stepping away from the ostentatious lifestyle that had defined him for decades. "Less to prove," he'd explained simply when I'd visited his new place. "Less to hide behind." Arya and the girls had returned to their lives in Northern California, where Mia was now applying to colleges, including USC, where her great-grandfather's papers were archived, and Zoe was becoming a competitive surfer, her natural talent honed by the summer spent on our private beach. And I had spent these months reflecting on the legacy I was safeguarding, not just the physical property, but the values and connections it represented. The trust documents ensuring the house would pass to my granddaughters remained in place, but I had made one significant addition: a detailed family history, recording not just the glittering moments of Hollywood success, but the harder lessons learned through crisis and recovery. Today my family was gathering again, this time for a planned celebration rather than an emergency intervention. My 70th birthday, a milestone I approached with the serene confidence of someone who had recently been tested and found her strength intact. Connor arrived first, bearing an enormous arrangement of hydrangeas, my favorite, and a small, carefully wrapped package. "Happy birthday, Mom," he said, embracing me with the easy affection that had characterized our relationship before ambition and insecurity had created distance between us. "You look beautiful." "Flattery," I replied with a smile, "but I'll accept it graciously." In the kitchen, he moved with comfortable familiarity, helping Maria prepare the appetizers for the evening's dinner. This, perhaps, was the most significant change, his willingness to participate in the mundane aspects of family life, rather than arriving late, making a dramatic entrance, then departing early for some industry event that couldn't possibly be missed. "Before everyone else arrives," he said, setting down the knife he'd been using to slice cheese, "I wanted to give you this privately." He handed me the small package, watching intently as I unwrapped it. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with my initials. "Open it," he urged softly. I did, finding the first page inscribed in his distinctive handwriting. For my mother, who taught me that legacy isn't measured in property or possessions, but in wisdom passed from one generation to the next. This is my contribution to our family's story, imperfect, honest, and offered with love. The subsequent pages contained his writings, Reflections on growing up as Felix Hartman's grandson, Richard Bradford's son, Rosalind Bradford's occasionally difficult child. Memories of this house, this beach, this family in all its complicated glory. Acknowledging mistakes, celebrating triumphs, exploring the values that had shaped him even when he'd resisted their influence. "Connor," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This is extraordinary. It was my therapist's suggestion initially," he admitted, writing about the patterns I was trying to understand. But it became something more, a way of connecting with our family's history, with the legacy I nearly helped destroy. I embraced him. This son who had finally grown into the man his father and I had always hoped he would become. "This is the most meaningful gift you could have given me." "There's more," he said, pulling back slightly. "I've been working on a documentary about Grandpa Felix, not the Hollywood legend everyone thinks they know, but the man behind the typewriter. The father, the husband, the mentor to young writers. I've been interviewing people who knew him, digitizing his home movies, creating something that captures his true legacy." "He would have loved that," I said, deeply moved by this project that showed such understanding of what truly mattered, using your talents to preserve his memory in an authentic way. "I thought maybe we could premiere it here," Connor suggested. "A small screening on the terrace where he used to tell us stories. Family first, then perhaps a wider audience later." "Perfect," I agreed. "Absolutely perfect." Aria arrived with the girls an hour later, bringing more gifts and the chaotic energy that multiple generations always create when gathered under one roof. As Maria served dinner on the terrace, with the Pacific stretched before us in shades of deepening blue, I looked around at these people who were my heart's true home. Mia, earnestly discussing film preservation techniques with Connor, her academic brilliance reminiscent of her mother's, but tempered with her own unique perspective. Zoe, regaling us with tales of her latest surfing competition, her confidence and joy so reminiscent of Richard in his younger days. Aria, watching her daughters with quiet pride, catching my eye occasionally with the wordless understanding that passes between mothers across generations. And Connor, engaged and present in a way he hadn't been for years, listening more than speaking, contributing without dominating, finding his place within the family structure rather than performing for an audience of admirers. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, casting golden light across our gathering, I rose to propose a toast. "To 70 years," I began, raising my glass. "Most of them good, some of them challenging, all of them part of a story still being written." "To Grandma Rose," Mia added, "who showed us what strength really looks like." "To this house," Aria continued, "and everything it represents." "To family," Connor concluded, his gaze meeting mine with newfound understanding. "The real thing." We clinked glasses as the sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that no Hollywood set designer could possibly replicate. In that perfect moment, I felt my father's presence, my husband's spirit, the continuum of love and legacy that bound us all together across time. Later, as darkness fell and lanterns illuminated the terrace, Connor set up a projector to share some of the footage he'd discovered for his documentary, home movies my father had taken of family gatherings in this very spot, grainy images of a much younger me chasing a toddler Connor across the beach, Richard, handsome and animated, debating film theory with my father, my mother arranging flowers in the kitchen, laughing at some forgotten joke. "I'd forgotten these existed," I murmured, watching these ghosts of our younger selves move across the makeshift screen. "They were in the USC archive," Connor explained. "Grandpa donated them, but they were never digitized until now. There are hours of footage, our history, preserved in light and shadow." As we watched these precious fragments of the past, I felt a profound sense of continuity, the knowledge that while individuals may pass, something essential continues through the stories we tell, the values we transmit, the love we share across generations. The house would remain, passing eventually to Mia and Zoe as the trust stipulated. But the true inheritance had already been transmitted, not through legal documents or property deeds, but through moments like this one, where the meaning of family was demonstrated rather than merely discussed. Connor had learned this lesson the hard way through crisis and near catastrophe. Aria had absorbed it gradually, through observation and experience. My granddaughters were receiving it now, witnessing the recovery of something precious that had nearly been lost. As for me, at 70, I had reaffirmed what I had always known, but sometimes failed to articulate clearly enough, that our most valuable possessions are not things at all, but the connections between us, the shared understanding of what matters most, the legacy of love that transcends material wealth. "Look," Zoe exclaimed, pointing to the screen where the camera had captured a much younger me standing beside my father on this very terrace, both of us gazing out at the ocean as the sun set. "What were you talking about with great-grandpa?" Mia asked, ever curious about the family history. "I remember that day," I said softly. "He was telling me about legacy, about how this house wasn't just walls and windows, but a repository for our family's soul." I smiled at the memory. I didn't fully understand what he meant then, but I do now. Connor reached over to squeeze my hand, wordless understanding passing between us. He knew now, too, the lesson he'd nearly learned too late. As the home movie ended and the screen went dark, we remained on the terrace, listening to the eternal rhythm of waves against shore, surrounded by the tangible and intangible inheritance that defined us. A house filled with memories, a family healed by crisis, a legacy preserved not just in trust documents and property deeds, but in the hearts and minds of those who understood its true value. Some lessons come at great cost, but the ones that matter most are never truly lost, as long as we have the wisdom to recognize them and the courage to protect what truly matters. In the end, that's what legacy really means. The Bradford family has emerged from crisis stronger and wiser, with a renewed appreciation for their true legacy. Thank you for following their journey from betrayal to healing, from misunderstanding to clarity, from potential loss to profound appreciation of what really matters. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below.